Hey, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to make a quick follow-up video to further explain why I think that Donald Trump could possibly, or at least is a candidate uh, to be the white horse, the rider in the white horse uh, from the first seal in the book of Revelations, as well as the beast, and why it could be both. Here, again, this is the outline that I've made. Where I've basically pasted verses from the Book of Revelations on a timeline on how I think the events, how I piece it together. All right. So, why do I think that? Let's recap a little bit from what I said last time about what the seven seals are. So, in chapter 5 of the Book of Revelations, John is weeping because he thinks that nobody could open the seals, but let's read what happens when at this stage. In chapter 5, verse 5. So we're going to look at, on this note, we're going to look at the last 3 lines where it says, "And one of the elders said unto me, Weep not, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof." All right. And so that's Jesus, obviously. And so we're going to go to where the seals begin, which is in chapter 6, where I made this column. You see this column right here with the pink nodes? That is all the 7 seals in chapter 6. And just to explain, this vertical, the nodes vertically that are in the window right now, is the tribulation period, which I believe that it's 4 different recapitulations, and I'll explain that. I'll give an example of why I think that further along. But let's look at the first seal, right? And by the way, I do believe that all the 7 seals have to conclude before the tribulation begins. That's why I put them vertically on this column. So when you get to the last seal is in regards to the trumpets. So here it is in chapter 8, verse 1 through 2, it says, "And when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets." Right? Those are the 7 trumpets needed to for the tribulation. And let me show you right over here in chapter 8, immediately in continuation, because that was chapter 8, verse 1 and 2. Well, here we have chapter 8, verse 7. It says, "The first angel sounded, and there followed hail and fire mingled with blood." So that's the first angel. And what did he sound? He sounded one of these trumpets. That's the first angel that sound. Pardon me, I'm having trouble here with these trumpets. This trumpet right here. Those 7 trumpets that were given to each one of the 7 angels. And how do I know? Because it doesn't mention trumpets here. How do I know that these are trumpets? Because when you continue in that chapter, when it gets to the 6th seal, it does say that it is a trumpet. So if you continue, he's for example, here it says the 3rd angel sounded, the 4th angel sounded, and we continue going down. The 5th angel sounded, and here it is, Revelations 9:13 through 16. It says, "And the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar which is before God, saying to the 6th angel which had the trumpet." The trumpet. You see that right there? Trumpet. And it says, because this is important, what I'm going to follow, what's following what I'm going to read here, where it says trumpet, it follows with, Loose the four angels that are bound under the river Euphrates. And the four angels were loosed, right? So in the fourth recapitulation following from that, in chapter 16, it talks about the sixth angel again, and it talks about the river Euphrates again. So basically, when it says poured out his vial, I do believe that it means the same thing as it's the same as a trumpet. He's just saying it in a different way, right? So it says. So again, what I'm saying is that chapter 16, 12 through 16 is the same as chapter 8. Pardon me, chapter 9, verse 13 through 16, because it says. It says, and the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. And I saw three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to battle of that great day of God Almighty. And by the way, when we're talking about the day of the Lord, don't let these false teachers and preachers tell you that it's the time of the tribulation. No. The day of the Lord is one single day at the end. Right? The tribulation that's happening during those 7 years is not the same as the wrath of God when he comes down himself on his white horse. So check it out. It says, the day of God Almighty. Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that walketh and keepeth his garment, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame. And I gathered them into that place in the Hebrew tongue called Armageddon. Everyone assembles themselves in that valley, in that place that we know where it is in Israel, called Armageddon, to make war against Israel. And what happens next? God destroys them. It says, and then the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, it is done. When, that means it's finished. It's done. The seventh angel poured out his vial. It's the same as a trumpet. We're talking about the same thing here. And it says, it is done. And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. The worst earthquake in history is going to happen right there. Is that the only thing that happens? No. But that's the end. So let's go back to the parallel that we were seeing over here, right? You saw how the seventh angel here in 9:13 through 16 matched what I read below. We'll look at how this seventh angel matches what this seventh angel does. The angel that poured out his vial is the same as this one that sounds. It says, chapter 10, verse 6 through 7, it says, and I swear by him that liveth forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things that therein are, that there should be time no longer. No more time. Time no longer, right? When the seventh angel comes, right? But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, so it says voice, trumpet, vial, call it bowl, whatever you want. It's the same thing. And it says, when he hath begun to sound, what's he sounding? The trumpet. The mystery of God should be finished. Finished. It's the end of time, as he declared to his servants, the prophets. All right, but going back to the seals and why I believe that Donald Trump is both the white horse of the first seal and also the beast, the first beast of the tribulation period of the first 3.5 years. Why do I think that? Well, because there's a lot of parallels to be drawn. Here, when we look at chapter 6, and by the way, it says, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals. That is the first seal. I know it says one of the seals, but that's the first seal. How do I know? Because the next one it says, chapter 6, verse 3 to 4, it says, and when he had opened the second seal. Chapter 6, verse 5 through 6 says, and begins, and when he had opened the third seal. Chapter 6, verse 7 through 8 says, and we had opened the fourth seal. Chapter 6, verse 9 through 11, it says, and when he had opened the fifth seal, and so on. Chapter 6, verse 12 through 17, when he had opened the sixth seal. Chapter 8, verse 1 through 2, and when he had opened the seventh seal. So by process of elimination, there's no more seals left. This absolutely is the first seal that we're looking at right here. So again, what does it say? And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, which is the first seal, and I heard, as it were, a noise of thunder. One of the four beasts saying, come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering and to conquer. That's what Donald Trump is doing right now. Right now, he is a conquering hero. And all the good guys, including myself, have to be on his side. But I do have pause, right? I mean, he's already had so many millions of people, unfortunately, including myself, wearing a hat with his name on the front of it, right on your forehead. Think about that. He likes to put his name on everything. The Abraham Accords that he started, which is something biblical, he wanted to name them the Trump Accords, but the people in the Middle East didn't much like that, you know? And that's something biblical, because those Abraham Accords are going to lead to the Revelations 11:1 geopolitical agreement that needs to happen for the tribulation to begin, right? But anyhow, he's the conquering king, right? He's on the white horse. He's the good guy. People love him. He's charismatic. Sometimes. And he has a bow, right? And the bow is a symbol of a weapon of strength, maybe military might. I know that people say, no, well, the bow, it probably means a rainbow. It's not a rainbow. They don't mention arrows, but it doesn't mean that he conquers without weapons. You know, a bow represents, you know, it's like if I said he had a gun. He was conquering with a gun. You know, oh no, but it's not by violence because he didn't mention bullets. No. The fact that they mention bow means that this person that's riding on the white horse has power, military power, you know. And it says, and a crown was given unto him, you know. Oh, he's president of the United States, which is like a modern day king. And basically the most important king in the world, leader of the free world, as they call the U.S. presidents always. And it is true. And he is conquering right now and to conquer. He went out to basically take out Maduro from Venezuela in an amazing fashion, spectacular fashion. Wow, the U.S. military truly is the greatest military in the history of the world. That operation, within the first 45 minutes, not even an hour, they already had President Maduro in custody. And by the way, Venezuela has weapons from Russia and China that they had purchased. You know, Iran has had their claws. They were building drone factories. Iran was in Venezuela, by the way. You know, and that's why he says that he wants to place the U.S. as, let's say, the leader of this hemisphere in this part of the world. And I believe, rightfully so. I mean, it's true. We can't allow China and Russia to move into these positions and become greater than us. So I have to agree. You know, uh, but again, he conquered Venezuela basically in less than an hour. Moved on to Iran. In the first salvos of that war with Iran that we're still, you know, dealing with. However, in the first hours, he took out the Ayatollah, the leader, the supreme leader, as they call him. They say they call Israel has always called them the head of the snake. So Iran is the snake, right? They call it the head of the snake, the Ayatollah. And, that's proven to be really, uh, accurate saying. Because even though they took out the Ayatollah, you know, the it, you know the military is behaving like everyone was a dead man switch, and everyone's like running to their battle stations, running to their positions, and they know the coordinates and the things that they need to do. You know, even without leadership, right? Just like a snake, when you chop the head of a snake, the snake, as I said last time, will be jumping, twisting like the Exorcist, revolting, hopping around. That's what the body of the snake does without the head. And yes, they took out the leadership, but the rest of that snake is still trying to strike back. Anyhow, just to tie it into why the rider of the white horse could be the antichrist as well. Well, he's portrayed as a rider on the white horse, and Satan loves to imitate Jesus, God. And in the same book of Revelations, in chapter 19, when Jesus returns, he returns on a white horse. And let's look at it right here. I tied this note to it. See for yourself. You look it up in your own Bible as well. But here it is. I'll read it to you. Revelations 19, verse 11 through 15. It says, "And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he doeth judge and make war. His eyes were as flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. And he had a name written that no man knew, but he himself. And he was clothed in a vesture dipped in blood, and his name was called the Word of God. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he tread the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God." Okay, so there you have it. There you have it. He's also a rider on a white horse. Again, I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and it says he had many crowns. So it's very similar to this, but it's not the same. This is the fake Christ, the rider on a white horse from the first seal. That's the fake Christ. Okay, and more reasons why I believe that he qualifies for these things. And by the way, people say, "Oh yeah, but again, his presidency is almost up. He won't be there anymore to fulfill, as the first beast, because he has to be there for 3.5 years." Remember, he's starting the ministry of peace in the Middle East. He's setting himself up to have power, even after his presidency. He's setting up the ministry of peace. And he himself said, not me, he said, research it. He said that at least he intends for this ministry of peace to even oversee the UN. Right? So he's trying to set it up to be the ultimate power, right? The ultimate ruling, body of the world, And again, just recapping the fact that he was shot on his head, because again, I say that his head isn't on his ear is on his head. So being shot on the ear classifies as being shot in the head, and that's deadly. And remember that he moved just before that shot broke. He moved. So really, he was really in the line of fire. Okay? And in chapter 13, because people argue, well, the beast, the antichrist, has to die, has to be wounded by a sword on his head. Well, nowadays nobody carries a sword. People carry guns. Guns are the modern day sword. Well, he has to die. He's killed. He's hit in the head. He's killed, and he resurrects. That's what the Antichrist does. No, remember, the Antichrist is a cheap imitation. Christ Messiah died on the cross and resurrected. Satan can't do that. The Antichrist won't be able to do that, but he's a cheap imitation. So let me show you in the book of Revelations where it says that he doesn't die. He's wounded and it heals. Hold on. All right. So here we see Revelations chapter 13, verse 2. It says, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound healed. So he didn't die. He saw his head as it was wounded to death, and his deadly wound healed. So he didn't die. He was wounded, and the wound healed. And it says, and all the world wandered after the beast. Remember the images after the Secret Service huddled around him, and then he finally stood up and put that fist up in the air, and he was saying, fight, fight, fight. The world wandered after him. And the world is wandering after him. You know what? We have a lot of commies, wokies here that are against Trump. But at a worldwide, level, people all around the world love what Donald Trump is doing, and everyone is rooting for him. And he, admittedly, even myself, because a lot of the things I have to agree. That's why I voted for him. Because he seems like that champion on a white horse. Can you argue with that? He really does. He's putting a stop to, the transgenders competing in sports against women, and, so many communism and the Islamification of this country, drugs on the border. Like, come on. We have to agree with a lot of these things. But anyhow, it says that he was wounded, and that and the wound healed, and the world wandered after him. Let's go back to the outline. Okay, so just the next bullet point, he had started the Abraham Accords, and the Abraham Accords are about all of the Middle East making peace with Israel, because Israel is the only odd misfit in the Middle East, being a Jewish state, whereas all the other countries are Islamic states, and everyone in the Middle East hates Israel. So the Abraham Accords were literally about that, about, bringing peace to the Middle East. And the main thing about that is countries making peace with Israel. So basically providing benefits to other countries in the Middle East just to simply get along with Israel, which is crazy. But that's really what's going on. That's what it is. And so he wanted to call them the Trump Accords, but they settled for the Abraham Accords. And so why is that important? Because in the tribulation, one of the recapitulations of the 7 years it begins in chapter 11, and that's how the intro of it is. That's what the first verse says. If you see here, this yellow node right here, where it says Revelations 11 verse 1 through 3, and it says, "And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth." So 42 months is 3.5 years, and that amount of days that the witnesses prophesy is basically 17 days short of 3.5 years. And remember that you would have to add another 4 days, because when the witnesses are killed, they lay in the streets for 4 days and 4 nights before God calls them up to heaven. All right, but this verse right here implies that there's going to be a setting apart of the Temple Mount. And it's talking about a temple that they don't have yet, but they're going to build. I bet you they're going to build it. And so that's a geopolitical agreement. And it could definitely fall under the parameters of the Abraham Accords, for sure. And, I don't know. It just really seems like, with that and the Ministry of Peace and him being shot in the head and, the way he's conquering, that's why I think these things. Anyhow, that's what I wanted to say. And, again, like I said last time, my intention with this outline / timeline that I made here was to print it out and share it with friends. But it didn't work out, because when I do send it to myself in PDF form, the resolution is not good enough to read what the nodes say. It's too much data. But at some point, like I said last time, I would like to make at least a little timeline of how I see the tribulation period or the events of Revelation happen in essay format, so that I could actually share it and give it out, to anyone that is interested. For this is not something that I want to hold to myself. I want to give it out freely to anyone that is interested. Anyhow, that's all I had. You guys, I really think this is the last days, and I've talked about before on why I think that there's no rapture until the end. Like, there is a rapture. I'm not saying that there isn't a rapture, but I've explained before why I think that the rapture literally happens on the day of the Lord. That it's not the tribulation that he takes us away from, but rather the wrath of himself coming down. And you just got to be prepared. And the main preparedness The main thing that you could do to be prepared is be right with God, you know, and be good to everybody, and just try to do good and love God above all things, and your brethren as yourself, because Jesus says that, on that hangs all the rest of the law. Uh, and again, and also honor Israel. Don't be against Israel, because as I showed you, literally Armageddon, for anyone that, believes, because there's some people that think that all these events happened in 70 AD, but I don't believe that to be true, and I could explain that perhaps in the future. But Jesus returns in defense of Israel, in the defense of the nation of Israel. And people say, well, no, because the Jews that are there are in Israel today are Europeans. They're not the real ones, they're Europeans. Listen, people want to define Israel on how it seems to them. It's not up to you. It's not up to me. It's up to God. God defines what Israel is. Israel is the lineal descendants, paternal lineal descendants of Israel. Yes, that is true. That is true. And we don't know who they are. But Israel is also the land. And Israel is also everyone who joined Israel. Since the time of Moses, since the time of Abraham, God told Abraham to circumcise all of his servants, and that their covenant should be in their flesh. Remember, God picked Abraham. God picked Abraham and his descendants. But those that he circumcised, they sojourn with him. They partake the laws for them as well. But it's in their flesh, in the foreskin of their privates, literally. Sorry to say, but that's the circumcision in their flesh. And we can explore those verses in the future as well. But also in Exodus, when Moses was leaving Egypt, it says that he left with a mixed multitude. And God in the days of Moses told him that everyone that kept the Sabbath and that kept the Passover and that that followed the law, that they were to be treated as one born in the nation. And one law should be for those that are homeborn and for those that sojourn among them. Right? And in the Torah, in many places, it talks about how they inherited, those that sojourned inherited in whichever tribe they basically lived, is where they would inheritance be, with that tribe. And so these days there's only Jews from the tribe of Judah. And so of course, if someone joined, became Jewish today, they literally, I would say that they also classify as authentic Jews, as authentic Israel. Yeah. Anyhow, be prepared, careful. These are perilous times. There's going to be a lot of attacks on this nation for being with Israel. So, if you don't have to travel, don't travel, and stay prayed up. And sometimes, we go off the rail, but you got to get back on the track and honor God and treat and love, try to love. I know it's hard sometimes. Sometimes people do things that I myself want to choke them, but you can't do that. We have to be our brother's keeper, and we have to love God above all things. All right, that's all I had to say. Have a great week, and stay blessed.